Thank you so much to everyone that has patiently waited, and thank you so much, MG, for the raid. Very much appreciate that. I think I've got everything set up. I do sincerely apologize. Honestly, it's been a fucking day, and I've been waiting for that phone call since 2 o'clock yesterday. Supposed to have that phone call on Friday. Organized it, and the guy said, "Oh, let me call you tomorrow." I didn't realize that it was Friday when I was talking to him, so he tried to organize an appointment for 2 o'clock on Saturday. I realized, called back, changed the time to Monday. No call on Monday. And I specifically left a message saying he can call me anytime between 11:15 a.m. and 4 p.m. So he calls me at 4:25. Like, seriously. Oh, anyway, thank God I am working from home tomorrow, so I don't have to stress as much about about all that sort of stuff. You do what you got to do. Yeah, well, you do what you got to do. That's what it boils down to. So, anyway, we are back for the defense's case in the Karen Reid retrial, and we are currently looking at Dr. Russell, which, I'll be perfectly honest, I've been so looking forward to that. I think someone mentioned it on the morning stream. I squealed when I realized it was Dr. Russell. I've heard she's already put Brennan in his place a couple of times, and I'm looking forward to it.
What do you currently do for work?
I work for the Medical Board of California, and I do some private consultation work.
Describe your work briefly for the Medical Board of California, including what is the board, what's its responsibilities, and what do you do in your role in working for the Medical Board of California?
So the Medical Board is a part of government, I think, that is established to basically police the doctors and some other health professionals. So what the role of the Medical Board is to protect the public health. To protect them from misdeeds by healthcare professionals, particularly doctors. So, would you like me to go on?
So in terms of the Medical Board, just the last question with regard to that, what type of knowledge do you have to have with regard to the practice of medicine to be able to assist the board in evaluating whether certain doctors have met the standard of care in a whole host of areas of the practice of medicine? What type of knowledge do you have to have?
Well, you certainly have to be up to date. You have to be quite knowledgeable on current treatment standards, what is considered the actual standard practice of medicine, and be up to date on literature and what, things that are currently accepted as the good practice of medicine.
Prior to your current role, where did you work?
All right, thanks for the right, MJ.
Well, before becoming a doctor,
it just, we can do it for maybe a little more for the jury. If you could go just before the Medical Board where you work, or do you want to do it from the beginning? Whatever way is best for you, doctor.
Damn,
doesn't really matter. Most recently, I worked for the state of California, the prison system. I was the medical director of the, or what they call the chief medical executive of one of the high security prisons in California. I did that for 5 years after retiring from my Los Angeles County job, which I held for 29 years.
And briefly describe generally your duties in that role.
So as chief medical executive, it was my duty basically to run the medical department. So I hired physicians, I supervised the physicians, made sure that they were providing the standard of care to the inmates that they were assigned to take care of. I reviewed many of their charts. I reviewed transfers and requests for services outside, such as specialty services, orthopedic services, and other kinds of services. And I reviewed every single death that occurred during my years there.
So just so you just said you
He was
investigated every
extremely
single
well
death
learned.
that occurred at the prison during your time in that role.
Yes.
Approximately how many death investigations were there that you performed?
I think approximately 60.
Now, did you have any involvement there in examining or identifying wounds of deceased individuals?
I did. My office was in the medical building, and it was very close to what was the equivalent of the urgent care center on site. And so when the patients would come in with an extreme injury, a very serious injury or near death, I would frequently go over right to the urgent care because that was my specialty. That was, my interest. And even though there was a doctor or another practitioner assigned to care for the patient, I would oversee that. And I would also, examine the patients, look for wounds, look for, signs of injuries. There were some, in some of these cases, there were some deaths, and I would examine those bodies very carefully for any kinds of wounds, just like I had done in the coroner's office for those years.
Basically, all she's done for a significant portion of her medical career is examine wounds and determine pattern recognition for injuries. She's extraordinarily qualified. I can't wait to see what Brennan tries with her. Honestly, it's going to be a smackdown, and I'm really here for it.
Yes.
To move this along, before you became the chief medical executive at Corcoran, where did you work and what did you do?
So I worked for 29 years, I worked at what's called the Los Angeles County USC Medical Center. Now, I know that's a lot to say. It was a county hospital that was affiliated with a medical school. It used to be called, prior to that, prior to when I got there, it was called General Hospital. It's a 19-story building, General Hospital, well-known. And now it's actually called General LA General or something of that nature. So anyways, that's where I worked for 29 years. And as I said, I had a variety of different roles there.
Can you just briefly name off the roles that you had while at the General Hospital?
So as I mentioned earlier, there was always a clinical component to what I did. I always had shifts in the emergency department that where I had to see patients and supervise interns, residents, physician assistants, nurse practitioners. So in addition to seeing my own patients, that I would also supervise them as they were seeing their patients. So that was the clinical role. Then there was an administrative role. And my administrative roles ranged from director of what they called life support training, which provided training to the trauma surgeons and the neurosurgeons regarding things such as advanced trauma life support and also to ER doctors. So director of life support training, director of QA. For many years, I was director of the jail unit, which was a very unique unit at this hospital. For a hospital, it was a very unique unit in that it had three components: a dedicated ER, a dedicated for jail patients or patients in custody, a dedicated clinic for in custody patients, and a dedicated inpatient. So it's three sections dedicated to in custody services. I was medical director of that for a while.
In addition to all that, were you also a professor?
I was an assistant professor.
Assistant professor. And what did you teach? Just a brief summary of what you taught.
Well, most of my teaching was clinical, bedside teaching, rather than in lecture halls. I would occasionally give lectures to the residents, the residency group, which was about 50 doctors.
And those residents are medical doctors, correct?
Yes, they are. Yes, yep. They are medical doctors. So I would occasionally give lectures to them, but a lot of the teaching was actual bedside teaching.
Thanks, Hurley. YouTube didn't like it quite so much. I'm not sure if it's just because of my cooking skills or whatever, but because I streamed that to the backup channel as well, and they actually age restricted it, of all things. And yes, this woman is a very hands-on teacher. She's very knowledgeable. Sorry, it's been a long day. My words may not work entirely.
Switching gears just a little bit and segueing. Over your course of your career as an emergency department physician and otherwise, did you treat individuals with animal-inflicted injuries?
Yes.
And did any of those animal-inflicted injuries involve dogs?
Yes.
And generally, is it correct to say that in terms of dogs, there's sort of the canine police dogs, and then there's the civilian dogs with which most people have experience?
Yes.
Are those two categories that you're familiar with, you're comfortable, as we discussed dogs, to have canine versus civilian?
Yes, because the injury patterns are a little different.
Okay. So what is the difference between a canine dog on the one hand and a civilian dog on the other?
Well, generally, civilian dog bites are rather minor. Generally, puncture wounds, maybe some slight avulsions, like skin defects, slight skin defects, usually not major. Whereas in the canine or trained police dog bites, the wounds the wounds I saw, were extensive wounds where there was extensive ripping, tearing, crushing of tissue, and many times.
She makes the fur missiles sound so appetizing, doesn't she? Like, I occasionally see the video of the cops that, or as a military dog, where they drop it from a helicopter and it chases someone down. And I'm just like, that's a real dog. Also, by the way, people, given there's so many here that probably haven't seen me before, I'm an attorney here in Australia, and I've been following Karen Reid since the first trial anyway. But generally, when I'm not doing trial streams, I'm laughing my ass off at funny legal takes and other news stories. So maybe just feel free to hit that sub button and give it a try after the trial.
Times even injuries to the muscles and blood vessels underneath.
From your experience, do you know why the injuries from a canine dog are as you describe them, as opposed to injuries from a civilian dog?
Well, in the LA area at that time, the dogs were taught to bite and hold. So they would, the canine dogs would get a grip on the individual that they were pursuing, and then hold on, even if the individual was trying to pull away. And so there were oftentimes tearing injuries to those, because that's how the dogs were trained at that time.
Even with canine dogs, did you ever see injuries from canine dogs on humans that were not a complete bite, that were an incomplete bite?
Yes. So if the dog missed on the first attempt at a grab, the teeth might only scratch the surface of the, usually extremity, by the way. And so you get what I consider an incomplete dog bite, because it was just scratch marks from the teeth. But the dog would then, try a second time and third time.
Now let's go to civilian dogs, a term used for more dogs of household pets that people have. Can you describe from your experience the type of wounds from those civilian dogs that you would see, and contrast it with what you just described for a canine dog?
Generally, they were minor. So a scratch, a puncture wound, maybe a little tearing of the skin, a little skin flap, but generally much different. In
your 30, did you say about over 30 years experience in the emergency medicine department?
Mm-hmm.
What did you see more of? Civilian dog wounds on humans or canine wounds?
Actually, it depended on where I was assigned at the time. So in the very beginning, because the jail unit was one of my first assignments, I saw these terrific.
Oh my God, I didn't think about that. They would have been using canines in the... So she's actually got extensive knowledge of what these police dog looks. Never mind. I talk again later when brain reboot.
Horrific wounds, many of them, I learned that what was in the textbooks about how to treat them was so wrong, because these patients many of them needed hospital admission, intravenous antibiotics, and many of them needed surgery. And what I was reading in the textbook was, that they, you could patch them up and clean up the wound and send them home with, sometimes with antibiotics, sometimes without. But anyway, so initially what I was seeing a lot of in the very beginning was the law enforcement dog bites, because I was assigned to jail board. And also I was very interested in this because I used to be a police officer. And before going to medical school, I was a full-time police officer here in Massachusetts for 7 years. And so I had this interest in law enforcement type injuries sustained during the arrest process, et cetera, et cetera.
So you had an early interest in, with regard to dog-inflicted wounds on humans and a police officer. Where were you a police officer in Massachusetts and when?
In the city of Malden. I was appointed as first woman police officer in 1977 to 1984, full-time.
And
Did she point that out during the first trial? I don't remember her being the very first female officer appointed in 77. God, this woman has some stories. I would love to do an interview with her.
while you were a police officer, were you doing that full time and anything else while you were a police officer? Were you pursuing school while you were a police officer, your college education, or was it separate?
No, I was a full-time police officer working the night shift, and I was attending Northeastern University part-time during the daytime to pursue my degree.
Bloody hell.
Were you a sworn duty police officer?
Yes,
Full member of the police force?
yes,
Did you attend academy?
yes. I attended the Boston Police Academy.
And how many years were you a Boston police officer?
No, I
I'm sorry,
wasn't.
I'm not Boston, the Vault.
I was a Malden police officer for 7 years, full-time.
Now let's go back to your emergency department and other experience. Can you approximate how many dog bite injuries you provided treatment for while an emergency department physician
Overall,
overall?
well, I don't know the exact answer, but I estimated it at a very conservative number of 500 dog bites because, would you like my methodology?
Oh, please.
Okay. So I considered that even though I worked there for 29 years, I would take 25 years and 40 weeks out of the year, because the other weeks I might be assigned something special, a special rotation or a special assignment or vacation or some kind of course. So 25 years, 40 weeks per year, that's 1,000 weeks. So even if I only saw one dog bite at this busy trauma center, that would be 1,000 dog bites in my career. But I just took it in half. I cut it in half and said five. I think at least 500.
In addition to the 500, did you oversee other physicians or healthcare professionals like physicians assistants, nurse practitioners, who themselves were treating and observing dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
Yes.
And approximately just the number, approximately how many of those, in addition to the 500 you just calculated?
Well, I generally supervised about 3 to 4 people per shift. You know, med students and interns, residents, whatever, all those people. And so I would say very conservatively another 500.
In terms of other work, I want to shift just a little bit in the emergency department. Did you encounter injuries from persons involved in motor vehicle accidents?
Many.
And you mentioned you were in Los Angeles. And in terms of those, can you approximate how many humans you saw and treated and diagnosed in the emergency medicine department from motor vehicle accidents?
Well,
Now I'm curious as to how she would have
it was a
calculated
very
that.
busy level 1 trauma center.
What is a level 1 trauma center?
So level 1 trauma center is the highest designation that a trauma center can have. And there are many requirements in place in order for a medical center to be a level 1, including 24-hour in-house neurosurgery, 24-hour in-house orthopedics, and an active research program, and many, many, many more requirements, and a certain level of training for all of the ER docs and all of the trauma surgeons. So we were level 1 trauma center, one of the busiest in the west of the Mississippi. And the hospital was located near some major freeways. So we saw lots of patients from motor vehicle accidents. But if I were I would say, if I took the 1,000-week number again, if I saw, at least 3, motor vehicle accidents per week, that's 3,000 at least. And that's just me. That's not the interns, residents that I'm working with.
So shifting again a little bit, as medical director of jail medical services at General Hospital, can you just describe a little bit about the work there? Similar to what you just described, or is it a little different?
So in the jail medical services, we dealt with people who were in custody. Some of them were also, drunk drivers and under arrest. Some were, they're arrested for a variety of reasons. Anyways, and if they were in custody, rather than have them in the main emergency department, we had a special emergency department for them. And so we would see, interesting cases there.
In terms of being a professor, is that your time as an adjunct professor at Cal State Los Angeles? Is that where you were an adjunct professor?
Yes. So while I was doing all this, I also had a part-time job teaching a course called Legal Medicine to graduate students, master's
I love this woman.
level students in the criminalistics master's program at Cal State University.
And in terms
you
of topics,
disarm
just briefly,
bombs and
some of the
stuff like
topics
that?
you would have taught them, and
Work for
particularly
NASA?
any that may be apropos to why
Tesla?
you're here today.
So knowing that many of these students were going to go on to work in crime labs or be crime lab directors someday, what I needed to do was to teach them about the aspects of a crime scene that dealt with a body or someone who was injured or killed, and so we dealt with things such as time of death, postmortem changes, wound analysis on the body, looking for different patterns of wounds or types of wounds that could direct them into to steer them in their investigation. Let's see, so many other things. Yeah.
There was a little bit of a noise here when you were talking about wounds and patterns. Could you just repeat that aspect of it?
Sure. So when a criminalist or a crime scene investigator goes to the scene, they have certain duties to attend to, and they need to be aware, that certain kinds of wounds, might indicate certain types of deaths. For instance, gunshot wounds in certain locations, or lacerations or stab wounds in certain locations might mean that this could be a suicide. This could be a homicide. They need to know, if there's something that might look like resemble a bite mark, that maybe that area needs to be swabbed or photographed, especially, and et cetera. So that's basically, it was very basic, but that's what.
Let's now shift again to your work at the County of Los Angeles Department of the Medical Examiner's Office, or is sometimes called the Coroner's Office. When did you have that work, and what did that position involve?
So that was from 1993 to 1995. And as I mentioned, there was death investigations. I was assigned a certain number of cases myself, but we also reviewed cases that other doctors had. And I, given my curious mind, when I would do my autopsy, I'd also look at whatever other cases were going on. And there was typically 10 to 15 cases going on at any given day.
This woman just must just have an amazing brain, and couple that with what is presumably an amazingly inquisitive nature. To work as a cop, going to school during the day, wind up at the medical examiner's office, and go out of her way to read additional cases. I wish I had a half of her, get up and go, honestly.
And so I learned a lot not only from my cases, but from other cases.
Did you ever conduct an autopsy of any individual that sustained dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
Please describe that autopsy.
That was a case I'll never forget. It was a young boy who had been attacked by 3 dogs, large dogs, but not specifically canine, law enforcement trained dogs, but 3 large dogs. And the wounds there were extensive wounds all over the body, or as best I can remember, including a wide variety, puncture wounds, some scratches, abrasions, contusions. There were a number of different types of wounds.
So let's now go, we talked about dogs and motor vehicles. I want to go back, please, to motor vehicles. Did you, as a forensic pathologist, did you ever conduct autopsies of decedents that were involved in motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
Approximately how many?
Hard to say. I'm not sure really, but probably at least, motor vehicle accidents, probably at least 20 or 30.
Did you conduct autopsies of victims of motor vehicle pedestrian incidents?
Yes.
Now, prior to working at the coroner's office, you worked at the jail emergency department at General Hospital that you described, right?
Yes.
And in that position, did you provide treatments to persons that suffered dog-inflicted injuries?
Yes.
And just approximately how many? And then we'll move on to the next topic.
Approximately, personally myself, about 40, but I was involved I worked as part of a team, and so I think we saw probably about 60 of these severe dog bites.
We're going to shift again to keep it moving. Have you authored or edited any publications on dog-inflicted injuries on humans?
Yes.
And what publications, please?
So I was a co-author on 2 peer review articles in major emergency medicine journals. One of them was describing the law enforcement dog bites injury patterns, and another one was more focused on the management of the law enforcement dog bites.
And did
Could
you?
this one be any more
Those
on
are ones
point?
you co-authored, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever edit the work of others, articles or books, as part of a peer review process?
Yes.
Describe that, please.
Yes. I was asked to be a co-editor of a 2-volume series on forensic emergency medicine in a peer review article series. And one of the chapters in one of those issues was on was on bite wounds. It was written by Dr. Gerald Vale, V-A-L-E, and who is a renowned board-certified forensic odontologist.
In terms of moving now from peer-reviewed articles you co-authored, peer-reviewed books and articles you edited, have you attended any seminars or talks or lectures on wound identification and or bite wounds?
Yes.
Just briefly describe a couple to give the jury a flavor of what those were.
Well, there have been many lectures on wounds of all sorts, and in the emergency medicine program, of course, there were lectures on wounds from various types of animals and how to treat them. In the forensic arena and at some of the professional organizations, there were lectures or talks on wounds, and also there was a yearly talk on bite wounds given by Dr. Vale at the coroner's office.
To state perhaps the obvious, have you had a lifelong interest in dogs and dog-inflicted wounds?
Yes.
And is that a professional and a personal interest?
It's professional.
Right, mostly professional, as you've described it. Let's now keep moving and go to another topic. Have you testified as an expert in court before?
Yes.
Is that in state and federal court?
Yes.
What topics have you testified to in state and federal court?
Causes of death, wounds, child abuse, domestic violence, mostly causes of death.
Have you testified as an expert regarding emergency medicine?
Yes.
Have you testified as an expert regarding forensic pathology?
Yes.
Have you been found to be qualified as an expert in each of those categories in the courts in the United States?
Yes.
Have you ever not been qualified to testify in any court in the United States?
No.
Have you ever testified as an expert regarding identifying dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
No.
And why not?
Because prior to this case, because it's not a topic that comes up very often.
So although it comes up often in your
Hey, Gladys.
practice, in terms of whether it's an issue in court, is it my understanding from your answer, it just doesn't come up that frequently?
Correct.
Are you aware of any other physician practitioner that would be testifying in court a lot on this topic, given what you just said about the infrequency of it coming up?
No, I'm not.
Now let's go on to
She's the preeminent expert.
what were in the last question on this line, give a general idea of the types of wounds that were at issue and whether there were any pattern wound issues in those cases that you've testified in court about.
Well, many of them were stab wounds. Some were blunt force wounds from a variety of mechanisms, including assaults or motor vehicle accidents. Again, a lot of wounds from accidents, and then of course gunshot wounds.
Were those the topics both living persons as well as deceased?
Yes.
Let's now move to, you've mentioned wound pattern, right? And are you familiar with the topic in the area of wound pattern recognition?
Yes.
Can you please describe for the jury what you mean by wound pattern recognition in your practice and from your experience? What is it generally? And we'll get to some more specifics as we go through.
Well, generally, pattern recognition is very important in medicine It's important in a lot of different fields of medicine, including radiology. They look for patterns on x-rays. Pathologists under a microscope looks for certain patterns to identify cancerous cells, for instance. So pattern recognition is very important. And then as a subset, wound pattern recognition is of course, very important to physicians that deal with patients that come in from from the street, so to speak, from who may have been assaulted, may have been child abuse victims, may have been domestic violence, elder abuse, those kinds of victims, because sometimes it's important to or you learn that what actually happened is not what the patient or the relative or the presenter said happened. And so you have to discern or figure out what happened in a case. And so you have to be able to identify certain patterns and regions of the body, for instance, where wounds are, in order to make that happen. And so it's very important. It's emphasized in emergency medicine.
When you were in residency, were you taught wound pattern recognition methodologies?
Yes.
And is wound pattern recognition an area that you continue to learn and then gain experience from your over 30 years as emergency medicine physician?
Yes, it was emphasized in both emergency medicine and forensic pathology, in both fields. Very important.
Is wound pattern recognition a generally accepted methodology that is applied in the practice of medicine?
Yes.
And you've given a few examples of that pattern recognition methodology. Is that pattern recognition methodology generally accepted and discussed in the peer-reviewed medical literature?
It is in certain articles,
Right.
Yes.
And we'll be getting to some of those.
Yeah, I'll bet.
In terms of wound pattern recognition, just roughly how frequently in your experience as an emergency medicine physician did you have to exercise your skills in wound pattern recognition?
I would say probably weekly, because I always questioned, what the patient was telling me, and did it fit? Did the story make sense? So I did it quite often.
And was that particularly important in child abuse cases where you may not be getting the story and you'd have to look at wounds and make your own determination?
Yes.
Now let's go and slightly move on to a very similar topic as to whether you ever had to determine the source of the wound without any input from a patient.
Oh, yes, many times. Many patients arrive to the emergency department unconscious.
And that's one
Yeah.
example of others. And with regard to
Sorry, it just occurred to me that my remote stopped working and I had to do something about it. It just occurred to me, though, it's interesting that they've got a lessee doing the questioning of her this time around. I kind of feel like there was a sufficient job done last time, but I'm wondering if maybe there's a strategy to it. Whether or not they're trying to elicit different testimony or if they just want a fresh set of eyes as to what she's going to say in terms of the dog bites. I'm curious as to what their trial strategy is, though. I personally probably would have kept it with, I think it was Jackson last time, wasn't it? Unless it's just to split the workload up, maybe.
language barriers, did you ever encounter that as an obstacle to you understanding what may have happened and you therefore had to exercise your pattern recognition skills?
Yes.
So now in terms of dog bites specifically, how often, if at all, did you have to look at a patient without input from anyone to determine whether it was from a dog?
Occasionally.
And can you recall any specific instance, or is it just you're recalling that you generally had to do it, but you can't recall a specific instance?
The second of that I generally had to do it. Sometimes, there was a language barrier and people couldn't describe what it was that bit them. And it was important to know because treatment for different types of bite wounds is very, very different.
And to be fair to the situation, you can't give any one specific. You remember this person was this age, etc. But you know that you did that on more than one. I'll withdraw that and go to the next area. Let's now talk about wound pattern recognition in the area of forensic pathology. What role does pattern recognition play in forensic injury analysis? And could you please just let the jury know what you mean by forensic injury analysis as regards pattern recognition?
Okay, so forensic analysis or forensic injury analysis is the analysis of injuries from a medical legal perspective. In some areas of medicine, the doctors are taught to just treat the injuries, and no figuring out about how it happened or what caused the injuries, so much as they treat. But in my case, both the emergency department and the forensic pathology training, I was interested in how the injury happened. That was a very important factor to me.
Why is pattern recognition important in the field of forensic pathology?
Well, you could look at a wound all by itself, an abrasion, for instance. Abrasion is a scratch. And in and of itself, it might not tell you how the wound occurred all by itself. But if there are a series of scratches or a series of lacerations or cuts, they can tell you more about how it happened.
And have you applied wound pattern recognition skills in your practice as a forensic pathologist?
Many times.
Could you just give the jury a flavor by just a few examples? Maybe two.
Okay.
Stick to dog ones if you can.
Self-defense wounds, for instance. An issue comes up often in court. If certain wounds were inflicted on purpose versus were they inflicted self-defense, and things like appearance and location can help you determine that. What was the question again?
It's just a few examples of applying pattern recognition skills in forensic pathology.
Oh, yes.
Thank you, doctor.
Oh, more?
No, yes.
Oh, yeah. Motor vehicle accidents. People who are struck by cars. There are certain patterns that one expects to see when a individual is struck by a car. And we're taught, to look for certain patterns, and that can help you determine if they were struck by a car.
In terms of motor vehicle accidents and patterns, can you give an example of some of the patterns you would expect to see in someone, and that you have seen in someone that is struck by a motor vehicle?
Oftentimes lower extremity fractures, for instance. Lower extremity bruises and fractures are commonplace for someone who's struck by a car.
And in your practice as an emergency medicine physician, a rough approximation of how many lower extremity injuries you have examined and evaluated with regard to motor vehicle accidents, including in the Los Angeles area?
Oh, I think probably hundreds.
Alrighty, so now let's continue with the topic that you were talking about. You called it defense injuries and wounds. I want to cover that topic. Are you familiar with the term posterior surface?
Yes, in terms of anatomy?
In terms of human anatomy. And with Your Honor's permission, could Dr. Russell point to her arm to show what she's referring to with regard to posterior surface for a defense injury?
Sure, go right ahead.
So let me explain just in general.
Sure.
Anterior is the front of the body. And
Excuse me, Dr. Russell, I'm sorry, if you want to stand up so the jury, with Your Honor's permission.
Yes, are you
Okay.
comfortable standing up and doing this?
Yes. So many years ago, anatomists decided on a nomenclature for describing parts of the body. And so the way the body, the descriptions go is that you take a person in what they call the standard anatomic position, which is upright with their arms, their palms facing forward. Palms facing forward. So that is the standard anatomic position. So anything in the front is anterior. Anything in the back is posterior.
Could you point to the arm when you talk about anterior and posterior, please?
Yes. So
That'll be really
with
helpful.
regard to the arm, if the palm is facing forward, that's the anterior. So the posterior part of the arm would be the back part that I'm touching right now. This back part of the arm and the back part of the forearm would be right here. So that's the posterior of the arm.
And what relation does the posterior of the arm have in determining whether or not a wound is a defensive wound?
Well, oftentimes when someone is being attacked, they will put their arm up to defend or protect their face, their neck, their chest, their vital organs, the vital parts of their body. So they put their arms up. And in doing so, the posterior part of the arm becomes presented to whoever is attacking them or whatever is attacking them. So this is the part of the arm that oftentimes gets injured when someone is defending themselves.
Thank you, doctor. How often have you observed
Bad
and
joke,
concluded
Kathy.
defensive wounds to the forearm?
Many times. I don't know. I don't have a number. 20, 30, I don't know, in terms of decedents. And then in terms of live people, many, many more.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
And if we just start with the posterior part of the forearm that you've described, and you encounter wounds there, are those wounds indicative or highly indicative of anything?
Well, they're indicative of defensive wounds being caused during a defensive action.
In your experience as a resident, a fellow, emergency room physician, and a forensic pathologist, and your time at Cochrane, have you experienced and taught the topic of defensive wounds?
Yes.
Now let's move on to another topic. Do you have knowledge of the dental features of dogs?
Yes.
Where did you gain your knowledge about the dental features of dogs?
Generally from reading articles.
And in terms of examining patients with dog-inflicted wounds?
Actually, that's a good point. Wasn't there a big beat-up not that long ago about how the prosecution reckoned that they had moldings of Chloe's mouth to prove that the damage wasn't done by her teeth to John's arm? We didn't see any of that during the case in chief, unless they're saving it for a rebuttal witness for Dr. Russell. Huh. It only just twigged to me that I didn't actually see that at any point.
Did that inform you anything about dog dentition or not?
Not specifically.
In terms of dog dentition, Your Honor, may I approach?
Okay.
Thank you. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I have this depiction marked as an exhibit for identification?
So, for ID,
For ID only, yes.
O for identification.
Thank you, Madam Court Reporter. Your Honor, may I hand it to you? I'm handing you Dr. Russell, what has been marked for identification as OOO, as in orange. Dr. Russell, do you recognize that?
Oh, it's magic!
Yes.
What is it?
This is a diagram of canine dental anatomy.
And could you please, just for the jury, briefly describe dog dentition and what we mean by the term dentition? I think most know, but just for the record.
So I believe dentition just means the teeth and the shape of the teeth and of the mouth of the animal or a person. And what this diagram shows is that in general, dogs tend to have a triangular mouth, meaning it comes to a narrowing towards the front of the mouth. It shows how many teeth a normal dog will have, and what they look like. There are different kinds of teeth, just like humans have different kinds of teeth.
And Your Honor, to assist the jury in the understanding of what Dr. Russell is speaking about, with Your Honor's permission, could we publish this as a chalk for the jury?
Is there any objection?
No, thank you.
Okay. Show the right.
Thank you, Your Honor. And we'll enlarge Mr. Woke, Dr. Russell, where would you like to start with regard to this, just to give the jury a brief discussion of dog dentition? Which part of this should we zoom in on?
I think the lower half around the triangular upper and lower jaws, right there.
Right there? Very
Yeah.
good. And Mr. Woke, if you could just, to start with, pull it down just so we can see the headings, and more importantly, the jury can see the headings of those two diagrams that Dr. Russell has pointed out. Yes, and just enlarge that. Can you read what's on the left and what's on the right? Is it slightly blurry?
It's slightly blurry.
Mandible, lower jaw, maxilla, upper jaw?
Yes, I can read it.
Right. All right. So if we could then just reduce it back down so it's a little bit so that it's not distorted. And then Dr. Russell, if you could just talk about it. And before we do that, I think it would be helpful, Dr. Russell, we can go to the depiction up above just to get the overall picture up above there of the dog. All right. Is that that's an overall picture, correct? Do you want to point out anything generally on that picture?
I don't have a pointer, but generally it's a side view and it shows and it's a skeletal view, so there's no skin, and it shows that there are some prominent teeth. They're called the canine teeth, and then there are some smaller teeth in front of that.
Excuse me if I couldn't interrupt. Pardon my interruption.
Yes.
I'm just going to try to locate in the courtroom a pointer, Your Honor. If
There's nothing on that, stand up there.
I got one right at approach. If there's one on this.
No.
Yeah, I didn't. May I approach, Your Honor?
Sure.
Thank you. Here, Dr. Russell. Hopefully
Okay.
that will work for you. Thank you. Excuse me.
Okay, so this is a side view, and it shows many teeth, and it's a skeletal view, obviously, and it shows these prominent teeth, which are called the canine teeth. Humans also have canine teeth, and ours are not quite as prominent. And then there are some teeth in front of that, which are called incisors. So that's the overview.
Right. And just to put this
Really
in
didn't have to treat
context,
too many
we
vampires.
are looking at this and talking about dogs. Have you had the opportunity to review any photos of the right arm of the decedent in this case?
Yes.
And is one of the topics you're going to address whether those wounds are from a dog?
Yes.
And so this background in terms of dog dentition part of what you're going to cover for the jury later on?
Yes, and I want to make one more comment, if I may.
Please.
Just when a dog bites, they usually don't bite with all the teeth. They usually don't get all the teeth impacted on the individual. So that's important to know. Oftentimes it's the anterior or the front teeth.
Why, doctor, is it the case that a dog doesn't always have a complete bite, get all of the teeth? Why is that the case?
Well, there's oftentimes movement. Oftentimes the dogs aren't really trained on biting techniques, and so there's oftentimes the person who's being bitten is pulling away and trying to avoid the bite. So oftentimes there's only impact with a few of the teeth in the front.
Great. Please continue, doctor, with your.
Dr. Russell, could I ask you to use this screen?
Oh, yes.
The other one, please. I think it's easier for counsel.
Oh, okay. So overview, these large canine teeth, these are the anterior teeth. And as I said, it's very rare for all the teeth to be involved in the bite. It's usually just the front teeth and canine teeth.
Are there certain teeth that are on this depiction that cause certain types of injuries, abrasions, tears, punctures? Is there any relation to the teeth in any of those categories, or can it be just general?
Well, oftentimes, because the canine teeth are so long compared to the others, they are the ones that seem to cause the the puncture wounds, and those are the ones that appear to get the grip on the person's skin.
Is there a medical term for a puncture wound from a canine, or is it just it's a punctate wound from canines?
I'm not sure there's a medical term.
Okay, please continue.
Okay. Well, that's about it on this side view.
And is there any other view on this exhibit that you would like to discuss with the jury?
Well, I was going to show that it's triangular again. The upper and lower jaws, they tend to be somewhat triangular.
Is that also sometimes the shape referred to as an hourglass, or is it triangular, or you prefer triangular?
I've heard it referred to as hourglass. I don't see an hourglass, but maybe in some dog breeds, because the different dog breeds have different shapes of their mouths. But this is just a generalization.
Okay, please continue.
I don't know that there's anything else.
All right, and so you.
Actually, yes. So here you can see. Go back, please. So here you can see the canines, and it's oftentimes this is the upper jaw, the maxilla jaw. It's oftentimes these teeth that do the impacting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you say it's often these teeth that what?
That do the impact. The upper jaw is oftentimes the part that actually makes contact with the skin. That's all.
Thank you. We can take that down, Mr. Wolf. Thank you, Your Honor. Now let's go to dog-inflicted injuries on humans generally. What type of injuries to humans can be caused by dog-inflicted bites?
Well, there are lots of different
go.
types of injuries. So they could be extremely minor, from a minor scratch to puncture wounds by individual teeth, to actual puncture and punctures by several teeth. There could be several abrasions because there are multiple teeth involved, and if they don't puncture, they at least scratch. They can scratch the skin. That's what I call abrasion, is a scratch. So they scratch the skin, but in parallel because the teeth are lined up. So They oftentimes have parallel lines. And then, of course, there are bruises that could occur because of the crushing injury, and there can be what we call avulsions, which are where an actual flap of the skin is removed. And I can go further, but there's a wide extent of injuries.
So there's a wide extent, a wide range. And can you just give one or two factors that are going to determine whether you're on the more minor side of the range to the more major part as regard to the type of bite that the dog is able to get?
Well, I think that when there is penetration of the skin and pulling away of some of the tissue, I would consider that a more significant bite because of what's needed for treatment.
Just bear a moment, please. Thank you. So in terms of the nails and claws of a dog, what type of injury, if any, can those cause?
So the nails they're also somewhat pointy or triangular in configuration or shape, and so they can cause scratches, and actually they can cause even deeper wounds if the nail catches the victim's skin a certain way. But most of the time, just scratches.
From your experience, what type of medical experience, peer-reviewed article experience, your whole professional experience with dog-inflicted wounds on humans, do you have experience with just a part of the range or the whole range of injuries that a dog can inflict?
The whole
Well,
range.
I think I have a very wide range of experiences because those very serious ones we talked about in the very beginning, where there were crushing and ripping injuries, or those were the trained canine dog bites. Most emergency physicians don't even get to see those. They're so uncommon. But I was because I was assigned to jail ward. That's how I got to see them. But in the majority, in the main ER, most ERs in our main ER, we saw the more minor type of injuries.
So in terms of if someone is bitten by a dog, where are they? Again, I think most people understand this, but just to be clear for the record, when someone gets a dog-inflicted wound, where do they usually go?
Well,
To the hospital.
Sustained. Ask it.
Doctor, are you aware of the medical facility from your experience where people go who have dog-inflicted wounds?
Well, if they feel like they need medical care, they will either go to a family doctor or most likely the emergency department, because the emergency department is where the resources are, the people that with the experience. They go to the emergency department in general.
Because dog
From
bites
your
and dog
experience
injuries are
for
significant wounds.
people in your literature review and authoring of documents, do people with dog-inflicted wounds go to a veterinarian for treatment?
What the fuck?
I'll let you answer it.
Not from my experience.
All right, now let's move to another category and to keep this moving along. How did you initially become involved in this case?
Well, very interesting. I live in Los Angeles, and I saw something in the Boston Globe about this case, but I really didn't pay much attention to it. And then eventually I saw or heard something, because I'm not from this part of the Massachusetts. I'm from a different part of Massachusetts. So anyways, eventually I heard or saw something about there being an issue with some possible dog-inflicted injuries versus maybe car-inflicted injuries. So that got my attention. I thought, that's interesting. And so that's how I initially became aware of the case.
Let's talk about the Boston Globe. How is a person from Los Angeles reading the Boston Globe, and
Well,
why?
That's
Is it like a one-time thing, or why is it you're reading the Boston Globe?
I had a subscription. I would, not always read it. I lived in Massachusetts. I went to school in Massachusetts. I worked in Massachusetts as a police officer. So I have some interest in Massachusetts, but none of that was in this geographic area. It was all north of Boston. So that was the area I mostly paid attention to.
Did you reach out to anyone after reading that article? And what do you recall from the article in the Boston Globe, if anything?
I'm going to sustain that.
Did you reach out to anyone after having read something in the Boston Globe?
Yes. I thought the question was interesting.
Objection.
I'll let that stand, but just answer Mr. Alessi's
Yes,
question. please.
yes, I did.
Go ahead. Andrew.
Okay. Yes, I reached out to one of the DAs in Los Angeles County.
And at that point, what, if anything, did you know about this case?
I didn't know much. I just knew what I mentioned, and I knew that the decedent was a police officer, had been a police officer, and that interested me also because I was a police officer.
Please keep your voice up, Dr. Russell.
I said that interested me also because I had been a police officer.
Go ahead.
So that's about all I knew, really.
Right. So did you know anything about what the prosecution was claiming or the defense was claiming at all? Did you know anything?
Sustained.
What did you know, if anything, about the case?
I'm going to see it side by really quickly on this.
What the fuck was the basis for that objection? What, if anything, did you know about the case? What had you read in the news? What were you made aware of from your own personal experience? That's a perfectly legitimate question. The fuck you on about, Brennan? Not that I should throw. Like and subscribe, people.
Moment,
Like and
Your
subscribe.
Okay.
Dr. Have, in terms of Mr. Wolk, if we could please, and Your Honor, may we publish what is already in evidence, which is Exhibit 167?
Okay.
Dr. Russell, do you recognize Exhibit 167?
Yes.
And how do you recognize that? Well, first, let's start. What is it? And then how do you recognize it?
It is a picture of the decedent's right arm and forearm.
Now,
Here we go.
without stating what it is, have you been able to form an opinion as to the source and nature of the wounds that are depicted in that exhibit?
Yes.
Now, in terms of the next area, can you describe for the
Thank you,
jury
Bruce. So kind.
what method you used in forming
Well,
your
he's also
opinion
not
without stating what your opinion is?
Well, I used pattern recognition and differential diagnosis.
So let's start with wound pattern recognition. Is that the wound pattern recognition you've been discussing up to this point in your testimony?
Yes.
And did I hear you use the phrase differential diagnosis?
Yes.
Please tell the jury what you mean by the term differential diagnosis as a physician, emergency medicine physician and forensic pathologist.
So when a patient, when a physician sees a patient and, or, an image in this case, and is attempting to make a diagnosis, it's very important that not only do they
Oh, damn it. Is it doing that thing where if I don't pause the video, no one can hear my voice? Seriously? Anyway, it doesn't matter.
consider what they believe is the obvious, but also in their mind go through other possible diagnoses and determine if they can rule them out, so to speak. If they can rule them in, rule them out, so that they are not just focused on one thing, but they've actually given consideration to other conditions that may be causing whatever it is that they see.
So, Mr. Wolk, if you could take that, we're going to come back to this back and forth, but I'd like to have it taken down until we do have the need to, and if we could have the lights go back on, Your Honor, thank you. So, does applying a differential diagnosis, well, let me start out. Do you understand what confirmation bias is?
I believe so.
Yes. And does differential diagnosis assist or not assist in avoiding confirmation bias?
I believe it assists in avoiding confirmation bias.
So, in terms of differential diagnosis, did you apply that concept in the beginning of your analysis of this case?
Yes.
How did you apply differential diagnosis to, among other things, avoid confirmation bias in this case?
Well, I in my mind, I went through other possible things or causes of wounds on an arm, and what they would look like, and the configuration, the patterns, etc. And then I figured out why these other potential causes of wounds in the arm did not fit this case.
So is a phraseology a synonym for differential diagnosis, what doctors call ruling out something? Is that another way to say it as well?
Yes.
So we're going to come back to the differential diagnosis. I just wanted to have that question first. Now let's switch to the materials that you considered informing your opinion about the nature and source of the wounds to Mr. O'Keefe. Describe what you looked at in terms of coming to your opinion, conducting a differential diagnosis, and avoiding confirmation bias. What did you look at?
Well, I looked at pictures similar to this. So there were pictures taken at the hospital. There were pictures taken at the medical examiner's office. I looked at the medical records. I looked at the autopsy report. And I looked at other reports from the Massachusetts State Police.
How much do you want to bet Brennan's going to get up there and go, well, you didn't do any of the autopsy or investigation yourself, did you? You're just basing it off information that other people and other reports that other people have done, aren't you? Same way you did with friggin' the Delta V guy.
And then, those are some of the things I looked at.
Did you look at any photographs, including of clothing?
Of what?
Clothing?
Oh, yeah, clothing, of course.
What clothing did you look at?
So there was a shirt, like a hoodie shirt that I looked at that had many defects in it.
And when you say defects, what do you mean by defects? Is there a more layperson's term?
Holes?
Thank you.
There was damage to his shirt.
Did you look at any history of any dogs with regard to any municipalities and dog incidents?
I'm going to sustain that, Mr. Leslie.
Did you look at any municipal records with regard to your review in this case?
So that's sustained.
Why?
With regard to other documents, if any, could you describe any other documents that you looked at?
Well, I also...
I'm going to see you at sidebar.
What the fuck? How is that objectionable? What, he's so desperate to keep Chloe's name out of her mouth that he's going to object to that? On what basis? He got there. That was an open-ended question. The first and second attempts, yeah, sure, they were directed, they were leading questions. Did she review any other documents while making her review on this matter? That's perfectly reasonable. All right, it's going to start pissing down rain if the audio gets too much. If the microphone gets too loud, let me know and I'll mute myself. Oh, honestly, Bev's just ridiculous. Damn, this sidebar's going a while.
1 o'clock
Oop, too far.
to an hour. 1 o'clock, and then today we'll give you an hour for lunch, okay?
May I continue?
I can't tell.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, there
Thanks for your patience, Dr. Russell. We had broke up where you had described the materials that you had reviewed. Based on your, and Mr. Woke, if we could please put the exhibit that we just had, and with your honor's permission, republish it. Thank you. Based on your review of all the materials that you had described and your experience that you had described, without stating it, were you able to come to any conclusions or opinions about the source and nature of the injuries that you see depicted on that exhibit?
Yes.
Yes.
And what is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those wounds were inflicted as a result of a dog attack.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you speak a little louder?
They were inflicted as a result of a dog attack.
And how did you form that opinion? Just describe your thought process to the jury.
Well, there are multiple groupings of wounds.
Do you have the pointer?
I
there?
do.
And if you could use the screen that Her Honor has requested.
So there are multiple groupings of wounds right here. Here's one on the what I'll consider the upper arm, which is above the elbow. Here's another grouping. Here's an interesting, complex grouping at the elbow. These are all at the posterior surface of the arm. And there's another grouping down here on the forearm. These multiple groupings are patterns. And they are, in my opinion, were inflicted by the teeth and claws of a dog.
We've discussed previously pattern recognition skills and methodology, and you just mentioned the word pattern here. Can you elaborate on what you mean by pattern with regard to this exhibit?
So there are groupings, and one can see that these wounds are going essentially in the same direction. They are oriented in the same way almost from the close to the inner surface of the arm or the anterior surface towards the posterior surface.
What is the
arm.
significance, if any, of that orientation you just described?
So
The defensive
well,
wounds.
that gives me direction, and that tells me that the dog's teeth were over here. Over here, the dog is over on this side of the arm, and the teeth started their punctures or their injuries over here, and through either the action of the dog or a combination of the action of the dog and the action of the decedent pulling away, or the victim pulling away, the teeth made these abrasions in this direction, from here down to here. And then here it's very complex because of the bending of the elbow. We don't know the exact configuration of what this elbow was in the arm. Was it fully extended, meaning it's fully stretched out, or was it partially bent? Was it fully bent? We don't know. But in addition to the pulling away movement, there's also the bending movement. So that one is even a little bit more complex. And of course,
Imagine going from listening to Welcher what's his face with his blue grease paint showing, oh, this is how my hand hit the car at 2 miles an hour, and the amount of rolled paint that's involved. Going to listening to what could be one of the most decorated medical physicians with an extraordinarily large amount of dog bite knowledge, going, yeah, that's not from a car, that's a dog bite. I can't wait. I mean, if they're hammering it the way that I think they're going to hammer it, Arca's got to be next. I think they have to, because she's got up there and said, no, these injuries were most definitely from a dog bite. I'd be putting the Arca guys on and saying, there is no way in hell the car could have done these injuries. So they've got the dog bite fresh in their mind, and they've got that imagery of the weird Pilates moves that John would have had to have done in order to actually be injured in the way that the prosecution's alleging.
there were some additional marks down here and some possible bruising down here, punctate marks down here, which may represent the lower teeth.
If we could just stop at that area. Have you observed in your experience what you call that complex area pattern? Have you seen that before?
Not that exact pattern, no.
But have you seen any that is similar to it?
I've seen some characteristics of these patterns before,
Right.
yes.
And it is the appropriate methodology to just to zero in on one section, or is the appropriate pattern methodology to look at all the wounds and then reach a conclusion?
The second, to look at all the wounds.
And
Okay,
could
so-
you please describe?
Why don't we take our recess?
Okay, Your Honor.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
fuck off.
All right, please.
Excuse me? She did that deliberately. She 100% did that deliberately. In the middle of a question, she interrupts. She could have waited the 2 minutes. The jury could have waited. The jury were probably hanging off every word.
Just close your notebook to follow me.
Goodbye.
It's 1 o'clock, so that's what the lunch break, isn't it? Oh, the bloody elevator music. I forgot all about that. Oh, well, let me again take this opportunity to say, people, I hope you're enjoying the coverage that I'm doing. For those of you that are unaware, I'm doing this on my way to and from work every day, so I'm usually about a day behind leading into the live day. But I definitely am trying to cover this as much gavel to gavel as possible, which is why we do it at 1.25 speed, and we get to skip through all the breaks.
Thank you.
Not too far. You didn't believe in any conspiracy theories up until now?
What is that? Session name?
I've seen enough shit in my time to know that conspiracy theories
All right, Mr. Leslie, whenever
sometimes
you're
come
ready.
out to be true.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon and welcome back, Dr. Russell.
Good afternoon.
Your Honor, if we could please publish Exhibit 1 in evidence.
Okay.
Mr. Wolk. Dr. Russell, do you recognize Exhibit 1 from your review of the documents in this case?
Yes,
And what is it that Exhibit 1 represents?
it's a picture of the forearm of the decedent.
And we left off at lunch, and I'm not going to cover too much old ground, just to reorient ourselves back to where we were. You were discussing the basis of your opinion and conclusion that you said that these wounds were caused by, why don't you restate? Well, let's continue on in the basis of your opinion. Let's just continue on. Can you go through what is in Exhibit 1 and describe how it is that you came to your opinion?
Well, I observed multiple patterns of striations or linear abrasions.
I'm sorry to interrupt you so soon. Do you have the pointer in case you want to use that available?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's multiple groupings of linear abrasions, and linear means like a line, linear. So there's multiple of those, and here's one. Here's another one closer to the elbow. Here's another one closer to the wrist, and here's another array of linear abrasions near the elbow.
In terms of these wounds, in assessing their source, do you look at them individually, collectively, or both?
Both. I look at them individually, and then I put them in context of how they relate to one another.
And how they relate to one another, is there a name of that methodology that you use in terms of how they relate to each other?
Well, I think it's a pattern methodology, pattern recognition.
And what pattern is it that you see here with regard to all of these wounds on the right arm?
Well, I see multiple linear groupings together in a area from the mid arm to the mid forearm.
Is there any analysis of direction?
Sorry, just in case that you didn't hear me over the video. I see multiple dog bites and scratches. Very clearly and obvious. Also, good night, Kathy. Have a good sleep. Thank you to everyone that's still sticking around and watching.
That is involved in your analysis?
Yes.
What is it?
I believe that these wounds were initiated closer to the anterior surface or the front of the forearm.
I'm sorry, Dr. Russell, to interrupt you, but there's a fan back here which I can hear, but if you could just keep your voice up, that would be great for me.
Yes, I believe they all started closer to the anterior or front portion of the arm. Like they started up here, up here, and the direction is towards the posterior portion of the arm.
Now, if we could just go back briefly, I want you to do a comparison. If we could go back, Your Honor, please, back to Exhibit 157 that we had up earlier.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 167. As between 167 and 1, which one is closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located?
The previous one.
All right, so let's go back to the previous one. So that one is closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located on January 29 of 2022, correct?
Yes.
And so January 29, 2022, if we can go back to Exhibit 157, or 67, excuse me, 167, can you tell when this picture was taken from the depiction?
Well, it says January 31st.
Okay, so is that the basis for you saying that the Exhibit 1 was closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located?
Yes.
All right, so I want to do another comparison, have you do another comparison of the two. If you can look at what is depicted in Exhibit 167, and now go back to 1 and see if you see any differences at all as to what's depicted. Do you see any differences with regard to the wounds on the arm, or the arm just in general? Let's go back to, see that now, let's go back to 167.
Well, the coloration of the photograph is slightly different.
And what do you mean the coloration?
Well, the skin tones here are more yellow than they are in the previous photograph.
And I'm sorry, what is, do you have a conclusion as to why there is a difference in skin tone in this exhibit compared to Exhibit 1?
Well, it could just be technique, lighting technique. I do see some lividity on the chest, postmortem lividity, and that's what that means is pooling of the blood, which happens after death.
Can you explain to the jury what lividity is?
Yes. So blood follows the laws of gravity, and the blood will settle to the dependent parts of the body. In this case, the body the body of Mr. O'Keefe is horizontal, and so the blood is going to settle from the top of the chest, which would probably be up here somewhere, down towards the back, which would be the inferior portion of the chest in that position. And likewise, it would happen on the extremities too.
So you just mentioned the extremities. Do you see any lividity on the extremity here, the right arm?
You know, actually, there is discoloration over here in the elbow area. I do see some okay. So there's several areas of lividity on the arm. I'm sorry. There's some right here. This redness right here in the near the wrist. I believe that that's postmortem lividity. I believe that this redness in here near the elbow is also postmortem lividity. And yeah, that's what I believe. Okay. That's postmortem lividity.
And again, lividity is that you said something that sets in after death?
Yes, it's the pooling of blood.
Is there, with regard to this depiction, do you see any bruising with regard to that elbow?
You know, I think that initially, earlier this morning, with the lighting, I may have said that this was bruising, but now as I think about it, and I see all this other lividity here, lividity over here, I believe that's postmortem lividity.
And if we could go back to Exhibit 1, and you said this is the one that's closer in time to when Mr. O'Keefe was located, do you see any lividity or bruising with regard to that photo?
I don't see any definite bruising. I do see some discoloration up here near the shoulder. I'm not sure if that's postmortem lividity or not. It could be early postmortem lividity.
So if we could, thank you, Mr. Wool, can we take that depiction down for the moment? What I'd like to do is and we'll come back to that. If we could have the lights back on, please. Thank you. Have you had experience prior to this case in performing your pattern recognition methodology skills with regard to dog-inflicted wounds on humans? In other words, have you seen dog-inflicted wounds that have a pattern on humans?
I've seen dog wounds that have had a pattern. I didn't need to do it utilize that skill because I also had other.
God damn it! Why can't you just say, "Have you seen other dog-inflicted wounds that look similar to this one?" I mean, don't get me wrong, that's a leading question, but you can get there.
Information about the case, for instance, police officer or the victim himself said, I was attacked by a dog.
Right. And for those that can you give an example, like in the ER, just as to how you would come to have that knowledge or otherwise? How would you generally come to have the knowledge as to a potential source of the wound?
Oftentimes it's the victim that tells me, or in the case of the law enforcement dog bites, I had both victim and police officers tell me that the police dog, inflicted these wounds.
And so and how many times generally in your career, we discussed it this morning, how many times generally did someone present with dog-inflicted wounds and you were told that these wounds were from a dog? Roughly how many in your career?
Well, all of the law enforcement dog bites. So that would be 40 to 60 or so of those. Plus, most of the non-law enforcement dog bites, the patients or the mother have said this, a dog bit me or a dog bit my son.
And for those where someone said something, the dog bit my son, were the wounds that you saw similar to or different from the wounds that are depicted in Exhibit 1 that we've had up on the screen?
On the civilian dog bites, there's some similarities, but not as many striations on the civilian dog bites.
And are the more striations on what's depicted in Exhibit 1, does that lead you to more easily conclude it's from a dog bite, or is it harder for you to conclude it's from a dog bite?
Neither.
Right. So is your prior experience as an emergency room physician, as a physician in Cochrane, does that experience allow you to exercise pattern recognition skills with regard to Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 157?
Sustain.
Do you use your pattern recognition? Did you use your pattern recognition skills in evaluating Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 157?
Yes.
In terms of characteristics of dog bites, if we can go back to Exhibit 1, please. Is Exhibit 1 highly characteristic of a dog bite or lowly characteristic of a dog bite?
Yes.
Sustain.
How would you describe the characteristics of what appears on Exhibit 1?
Well, what I see on Exhibit 1 is multiple strikes from a dog.
I'm going to allow it.
Can you please
I
repeat
kind of
your
feel like
answer?
you have to allow
Yes,
that.
What you see?
Multiple strikes from a dog.
And with regard to, do you see any characteristics in terms of a medical observation with regard to those strikes?
I don't understand the
Okay.
question.
Are you familiar with the medical term pathognomonic?
Oh, yes.
What is
What the fuck?
the definition of?
Wait, what was that? Pathognomonic. Okay, I'm trying to think of the etymology of the word here. No, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to let them do it.
Pathognomonic.
Pathognomonic in medicine means that the characteristics of a condition are so highly specific and unique that they basically say that it can only be from a certain condition and no other condition. So to the exclusion of all other conditions. That's what is meant by pathognomonic. At least that's my understanding.
Do you consider these wounds pathognomonic?
Sustain.
How do you evaluate these wounds in terms of what you call their characteristics?
I characterize them as highly specific for a dog attack.
Yes.
I'm
What's
going
your
to
base of your
strike the
objection
last
on that
word, Mr. Wilson.
What?
In
Hang on.
terms of
I'm going to strike the last.
you call their characteristics.
I characterize them as highly specific for a dog attack.
Yes.
So she struck the word attack. What? Because it's too prejudicial? Screw you, Bev.
I'm going to strike the last word, Mr. Wilson.
In terms of the characteristics that you have talked about, are there any other aspects of dog dentition that you can discern from Exhibit 1?
I don't understand the question.
You mentioned earlier when we had the dog dentition exhibit up, you mentioned an arch. Is there any aspect of Exhibit 1 that concerns an arch?
Yes, there is, in my opinion, an arch-like structure right here towards the lower part of the forearm, towards the wrist, suggesting that this here is made from the very front teeth of the dog. Now, when one looks at these injuries or wounds, one has to remember that, number one, this is not a mannequin. This is a person whose skin is somewhat elastic, whose skin will slide over the underlying bones, and so therefore some of the wounds may have been created by the exact same teeth, for instance, but look differently, depending on the part of the anatomy, the elasticity of the skin, also depending on things like if there was clothing or something in between the teeth and the skin. So one has to consider the end. Also, there may be motion motion effects. The living victim could have been pulling away from the dog. The dog could have been, pulling or jumping and only catching a glimpse, a little slight bit of the skin with his teeth. So there's a lot of movement and things that one has to consider when an injury is inflicted on a body.
Objection, move to strike.
I'm going to strike that.
Can we approach
Oh,
our
bugger off. So it's okay for Welcher to definitively say, oh, there was most definitely a collision. She's speaking from an expert opinion, and she's already said that she is of the opinion that those injuries were caused by a dog. Striking that entire thing. Fuck you. I don't genuinely believe there was anything there that was objectionable. But hey, I guess I'm just too reasonable. It's a good point. She said it a couple of times before lunch, and only now Bev's actually raising it. Nope, too far.
Mayor, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. If we could put the Exhibit 1 back up on the screen, please, Mr. Wolf. Dr. Russell, is what's depicted on the screen one dog bite or more than one dog bite?
Objection.
Ask it differently, Mr. Wilson.
Dr. Russell, can you determine from this depiction, how do you evaluate this depiction with regard to dog bites?
Well, I see several groupings of wounds. Here's one grouping up near the shoulder. Here's another grouping.
Now I'm starting to understand cut to the chase's criticisms. Yes, it was very obvious that Alessi was trying to lead her down to a certain path there, the same way that Brennan's done with many of his witnesses. And yeah, I feel like she didn't latch onto the terminology that he was going for there. But hopefully she still gets the job done.
Near the elbow, but above the elbow. Here is a third grouping around the back of the elbow and the upper forearm. Here's some additional marks. I think they're separate, but I don't know exactly if they are separate dog bites or scratches. And then there's another grouping around the posterior forearm near the wrist. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's at least 4 different types of either bites or combination bite and claw marks.
You mentioned claw marks. Is there any evidence of claw marks in this exhibit?
It's hard to say exactly what this, what these marks are. This one here, and even to a certain extent, this one here has some characteristics of both claw marks and bites. So
even though you may not be able to determine whether it's a claw mark, can you determine, or the specific type of mark, can you determine that those are from a dog?
I believe they are, yes.
So now let's go. You mentioned, we'll switch. We can leave that up for just a moment because we're going to come right back to it. And Dr. Russell, earlier on, you used the phrase incomplete dental impression. Do you recall that?
Something like that, yes.
What phrase would you like to use? Because you were describing whether a dog or not had a complete bite. What phrase would you like to use?
That's okay. Incomplete bite.
Okay.
Might
Do you see any evidence of an incomplete bite on Exhibit 1?
I believe all of the bites here are incomplete.
Why do you come to that conclusion?
Because in my opinion, they don't penetrate the skin, which I would consider more of a bite or more of a complete bite. So they're just scratches on the surface of the skin.
When you say they don't penetrate the skin, we see the marks that are on there. What do you mean that they don't penetrate the skin?
They're not punctures, they're abrasions.
And extend into the soft tissue underneath.
And what, in terms of incompleteness that you just described, have you observed incomplete dog bites in your career?
Many.
Roughly how many incomplete dog bites have you observed and treated in your career?
Over 100.
Hundreds.
In our incomplete bites, the majority of bites from civilian dogs, or are they a minority of the bites from civilian dogs?
I believe they're the majority of the bites of civilian dogs.
Did you determine whether these wounds occurred at the same time?
I believe they did.
Why do you come to the conclusion that they occurred at the same time?
Because of the wound characteristics, the coloration of the wounds, the tissue reaction to the wounds. So they all, timing are at the same time, around the same time.
Did you determine whether these wounds were sustained by Mr. O'Keefe before or after he died?
Before he died.
How do you reach the conclusion that these wounds were suffered by Mr. O'Keefe before he died?
Because they have what we call a vital reaction. So there is an ever so slight vital reaction or inflammation around the edges of the wounds. And so that determines that, that supports the fact that they were inflicted during life.
Dr. Russell, did you observe Mr. O'Keefe's right arm personally?
No.
Is it generally accepted in the practice of medicine?
Here we go. Now he's going to try and get ahead of some of the questions that he knows Brennan's going to ask.
Medicine, particularly emergency or pathology, to observe and determine the source of a wound from a photograph after death?
It is generally accepted.
And have you, in your career, used photographs to determine wounds and patterns of wounds?
Yes.
And is that an accepted practice?
Yes.
And it is a generally accepted practice?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, in conducting we're going to switch a little bit now to what you call the differential diagnosis. In conducting your differential diagnosis with regard to motor vehicle accidents, describe for the jury how you performed that differential diagnosis with regard to the decedent. And we can leave that up for just a moment. Go ahead, Dr. Russell.
Okay.
So I'm going to need to see you. Sorry, folks.
This is why I can't stand the non-speaking objections. What was he objecting to there? What's the basis? Oh, I'm sorry. He's going to leave the image up? Grow up. You know, just saying, if you're over watching on X, feel free to, I don't know, repost the stream. Share it out there.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes.
With Your Honor's permission to republish Exhibit 1. Thank you for your patience, Dr. Russell. Is what the wounds you see on Exhibit 1 consistent or inconsistent with what you have seen from your experience with regard to motor vehicle accident victims?
No.
Inconsistent.
It's inconsistent. Excellent.
If I
Yes.
could have published Exhibit 206, which is in evidence, Your Honor.
Yes, Chloe was miraculously rehomed very quickly.
Do you recognize Exhibit 206?
Yes.
Did you review that as part of any report in this case?
Yes.
And can you describe how you reviewed this document as part of your evaluation of this case?
Well, I reviewed the injuries, which are so this is a decedent, a picture of a decedent, a different case, not the decedent in this case, totally separate case.
And
So
is this from Dr. Welcher's report that you reviewed?
Yes.
All right, so continue, please.
And so this is a person deceased, looks like in the street, and he's got multiple injuries. And this is allegedly from an auto versus pedestrian accident.
So if we could, are you able to discern any injuries to any limbs from this? If you could zoom in on the limbs, Mr. Wolf, thank you.
So there is a very extensive degloving, partially degloving, avulsion injury to the forearm of this individual. The extensive skin loss, damage to the subcutaneous tissue, possibly damage to other tissues beneath that.
Oh, I can't stand degloving
Mr. Wolf, if you
injuries. They freak me
back
out.
out and go to the list that is highlighted in the original of this. And Dr. Russell, can you tell me whether you evaluated the list, and if so, how did you evaluate that list in connection with the photo?
Well, the photo is limited only really to the upper chest and the right arm. And so I can't comment on any of the CAT scan findings here on this list. But this was a list of numerous traumatic injuries to this person. And regarding the arm, it says right upper extremity wound with vascular injury, clinical.
What does that mean, if anything, to you?
Well, that suggests it's a soft tissue wound. However, what they're saying is clinical, so they're not commenting on if there were any X-ray findings, for instance. On an X-ray, but I mean, would be a post-mortem X-ray, and this is just a clinical diagnosis or a visual hands-on diagnosis.
Do you know whether that line that you just read relates to any part of the photograph? Any part of the photograph?
Oh, I believe it relates to that injury that we pointed out in the previous photograph.
Can you switch back to that, please, Mr. Wolf? If you could just zoom in and just what does...
So this is the wound that they are talking about. It's a large gaping wound, soft tissue wound.
If we could go back to the list, please. Zoom in. Thank you.
But
Please continue.
no, what I was going to say is that there are multiple other injuries in this person. Multiple serious, significant injuries: subdural hemorrhage, subarachnoid hemorrhage, intraventricular hemorrhage, liver laceration, pneumothorax. That's blood and air in the chest cavity outside of the lungs. So it's in an area where it shouldn't be. This person had numerous injuries.
Are you able to compare these injuries in that photo in this Exhibit 206? And did you compare them to your review of the autopsy report and other medical records of Mr. O'Keefe?
Sustained.
Answer the question? Oh,
Yeah, no, there was an objection that was sustained.
You can take that down. Did,
Oh, come on,
from your
Alessi, you
review,
can
did
reword
Mr.
that.
O'Keefe sustain any liver laceration?
no,
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any gaping, as you called it, lacerations to the right forearm?
no,
Did Mr. O'Keefe sustain any pneumothorax injuries that you were describing with regard to 206?
no pneumothorax.
In terms, let's switch to another topic. Let's talk about clothing of the decedent. In forming your opinion, did you consider Mr. O'Keefe's clothing in relation to his wounds?
Yes.
If we could, Your Honor, have Exhibit 150 in evidence published.
Okay.
Do you recognize what's depicted in Exhibit 150?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's a picture of part of the hoodie, sweatshirt or shirt that Mr. O'Keefe was wearing at the time.
And wearing when?
At the time of his death.
And did you evaluate this photo as part of your review of the autopsy report?
Yes.
And we're going to come back to this. If we could please switch to, Your Honor, 147C in evidence.
Okay.
Thank you. And what is 147C?
So this is a close-up of the sleeve of that shirt that we just saw on the previous image. And there's a hole or defect here in the sleeve, which I'm circling with the pointer. And there's a label that labels it number 1. And so I see this hole that is rather round and appears to have some fabric coming out of the hole towards the exterior of the jacket or the shirt.
Did you attribute any significance to the shape of the wound? And if so, what significance?
The shape of the hole, yes. So it's rounded. I actually attributed a lot of significance to that.
Describe a lot of significance that you attributed to this hole.
Well, I believe that this hole was made by a canine tooth, and with the tooth going into the shirt, reaching the skin, and then coming out of the shirt, pulling out some fabric with it.
And we'll come back to this. If we could, Mr. Wolk, go to 147D as in David that's in evidence. Do you recognize this photo?
Yes.
What is it?
A round hole in the shirt, again with some fabric fibers pointing towards the outside of the shirt.
Is this the same hole that we just saw on 147C or a different hole?
Could we go back? I don't know.
Okay, so let's now go back to Exhibit 150. What significance, if any, do you give to the various triangles that are on the hoodie? Could you describe to the jury what those are and what's their purpose?
So the triangles are labels that were placed by either the police or the crime lab or someone, and the point of the triangle generally is pointing towards a hole in the shirt. As you can see, there are multiple ones here, and I want to make sure that you don't confuse it with this rather large defect, which is caused by something else.
So let's start with each one, and we'll go through these quickly. Let's start and zoom in on number 1. What did you conclude about the source of that hole in the hoodie?
Sustained.
Did you evaluate what is depicted as number 1 in that slide as part of your review?
Yes.
And what was your evaluation?
Sustained.
Let's go back and zoom out. Have you in your career examined clothing either as part of your forensic pathology practice or your emergency medicine practice to determine the source of defects in clothing?
Yes.
How many
So there's
times
no
have you done that
differential way.
approximately in your career?
Several hundred.
And have you, in those several hundred times, have you ever had to reach a conclusion as to whether there was any connection between defects in clothing and wounds to humans?
Many times.
Can you give some examples of the many times you've had to look at clothing and defects in clothing to assist you in determining wound recognition in a human?
Yes. So let me clarify. It's mostly used in forensic pathology, not so much in emergency medicine. The clothing and the cause of the wound is as important as in emergency medicine as the treatment of the wound. But in forensic pathology, it's a key component to any examination where you think that it was an unnatural death. So, so I've done it in gunshot wounds, in stab wounds, multiple times. Looking at the defects, looking at the direction of the, of what I think the bullet track was, determining entry and exit wounds. In stab wounds, I've utilized them to help determine offensive and defensive wounds or injuries. So yes, many times.
Have you ever performed that analysis? You mentioned, testified earlier, 500 to 1,000 evaluations of dog-inflicted wounds on humans. Have you ever performed the analysis of defects in clothing and compared them to wounds on humans in the context of dog-inflicted wounds on humans?
I don't think so. Perhaps.
Well, yes. So in terms of, have there been any instances of doing that in your career? Have you done that at all in your career?
Maybe that one child.
All right. So let's go now to
Did my mic go?
the,
Oh!
you were
was that?
discussing the defects in the arm as well as the wounds in the arm and then the defects in the clothing. In terms of back to Exhibit 1. In terms of that pattern that is in the arm, and in terms, let's go back to the hoodie. I'll strike that. Have you in your career, in the terms of evaluating motor vehicle accidents, have you evaluated the clothing of victims of motor vehicle accidents?
Yes.
How many times roughly have you evaluated what clothing looks like in terms of motor vehicle accidents?
Well, in many cases, I had to cut off the clothing in the emergency department, so I observed the clothing then, and then in the post-mortem cases, I evaluated the clothing, but oftentimes sometimes it wasn't helpful.
Have you ever evaluated clothing in determining whether or not the defects in the clothing are consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident? Have you ever evaluated that as a forensic pathologist?
Not specifically.
Right. And in terms of your observations in
5
either
minutes,
emergency
right?
medicine or forensic
Actually, depends how
pathology,
much
have you ever observed
Sorry, I don't really want to talk over Leslie there. Probably 5 minutes. Depends how girl Leslie's got in terms of direct though. Given that we didn't get to the cross-examination, which I'm assuming took a little bit longer than otherwise, I'll probably be back in a couple of hours to finish off the rest of today.
defects from motor vehicle accidents in clothing?
Yes.
Is what is depicted in this exhibit consistent or inconsistent with a motor vehicle accident?
In your opinion, Damn it, Alessi, you're better than that. You know better than that.
In determining, let's go back to Exhibit 1, please. In determining and reaching your opinion with regard to the source of these wounds, is it necessary for you to reach that opinion to see a specific dog to determine whether the wounds are from a dog in general?
No.
And in your experience that you talked about earlier today, the 500 to 1,000, was it ever necessary in that experience to go locate the dog, to see the dog, to treat or evaluate the patient?
No.
Why is it, well,
May Brennan stub his toe on every door jam he crosses.
in terms of, we're going to move to another category, studies. Did you review any studies informing your opinions in this case?
Can we put the lights on and take this?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Yes.
Stop interrupting.
Yes, many.
And did those studies that you review support or not support your conclusions in this case?
Sustain.
Which studies did you rely upon?
Well, I reviewed quite a few, 10 to 20 in depth, and I relied a lot on 2 of the articles.
Do you recall the names of the lead authors in the studies that you said, that you just referenced?
Yes, one of them was Demuniak.
Would you spell that, please?
I wish. Demuninyck, I believe.
Can you spell that? I wish.
And was there?
And then there was another one, Pollack, Pollack.
Oh, excuse me.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor,
There we
my
go.
recollection is correct. We've already pre-marked as exhibits for identification these studies, 2 studies. I may be incorrect in that. If so, I have studies. I'm going to show them to Mr.
All right, what do we got?
Thank you. So we can just
There's an hour.
make sure I have all the pages.
Oh, all right, ladies and gents. Given that I've got to get home and cook, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to come back and finish off the last hour later on this evening. So keep an eye out. There'll be a 3rd stream for the day, unfortunately. Well, I mean, unfortunately for you guys, because you guys still have to listen to me. But it's definitely going to have to happen so that I can get up to date prior to tomorrow. So, keep an eye out, but thank you so much to everyone. Particularly, holy crap, there's 200 people across various platforms. So, thank you very much for being here, and please remember, you are not a piece of shit. You have value and do contribute to society, especially for being here and keeping me company and keeping the channel afloat. As always, people, stay healthy, wealthy, and wise, and I will catch you all very, very shortly. I won't worry about talking about tomorrow unless, actually no, because some people won't be here for the stream in a couple of hours. So I'm working from home tomorrow because I got to take my car into the shop. So I'll probably be streaming at the usual time, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, yes, please remember to hit that like button on the way out, and I'll catch you all soon. Peace out, peeps.
And again, on your way out, please do me the favor of hit the like and subscribe button if you're so inclined. It costs nothing. It's absolutely free, and we'll be friends forever. Bye now.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms
to push their own personal bias, and agenda to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
This shit, I'm out. Fuck this shit, I'm out. No thanks. Don't mind me. I'ma just grab my stuff and leave. Excuse me, please. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Nope. Fuck this shit, I'm out. Alright then. I don't know what the fuck just happened, but I don't really care. I'ma get the fuck up out of here. Fuck this shit, I'm out.